So what we're talking about here is the advent of Nocember, given that the month of December is often erratic and lets us down in terms of productivity. And the whole aim that we've got here is to avoid the productivity doldrums as you come in to December by beating them. So what we've done is we've just combined the 2 months, and the whole idea of what we're going to show you to do that is to pretty much beat what we call the productivity doldrums. Some of you might have already experienced this. It doesn't always hit on these months. I'm using these as an example. It happens to entire sales teams, notwithstanding the fact that here we're talking in the context of an individual, where your focus may well have been, certainly as you came into the month of August, starting to think about spring on the way and getting stuck into the prospecting to pick up those listings for the new season. And of course, in putting those prospects together, we typically in August succeed at that. And whilst we're pushing on that very heavily, that is often a very poor sales month. And you'll see how this pans out in terms of the 1 in 4. As you see, as you move into September, given that you've actually set up all those prospecting, and if you've been very diligent around it, your September could have been a fantastic month. I know that we've got a lot of our cream operating system people. I know the Nidus group's on here, you know, Paige, 10 listings. Some of the other people out there, you know, Marvin, back up 2. We had the same thing occur with people in Rotorua, New Zealand. They were doing the same things, hitting around and knocking on double-figure listings. And of course, during that month, you make some sales because the good listings are always snapped up fairly readily. You hit October and you're kind of left with those properties that are overpriced, and you start to focus on the reductions. Now, this can often lead to a sales bonanza in the month we're in now, November, but sadly, that doesn't necessarily carry through into the last month of the quarter, which is December. And the danger of that is that we can find ourselves back in this August month. And if you look at this over a year, especially as it relates to December and January, if you're not careful, you can actually have 2 months that are a bit of a lull. So some time ago, we decided to not write off December, but combine the two so that Nocember could indeed be, if not our best month, probably our greatest month of the year by putting them together. So we say that the balance of productivity is maintained by a prioritized activity focus. And I've got to tell you this, if you're listening to me as a salesperson, I can almost categorically tell you the fundamental issue as I see it with salespeople is the prioritization of tasks they need to perform. So often we hear that, you know, it's about working hours, it's about the time you spend in it. I've got to disagree with that. To my mind, the major thing that a great and successful salesperson can do is get a clear understanding of how it is they should be prioritizing the activities that they need to do every day. Putting this into a simple context, so often I'm asked, how is it that you manage to list into double figures each month? And how is it that you then, on top of that, managed to list, to sell as many as 10 properties month in, month out? And I can tell you that it's because of that focus and being able to maintain that, excuse me, over a period of time, that as I moved into December, it was just natural. And quite often I would find myself listing, but not so much listing right up until Christmas Eve. I mean, I have listed properties on Christmas Eve, but importantly, selling properties right up until Christmas Eve. And this is always about premeditated behavior and balancing that productivity with a prioritized activity focus. So if you get that focus in order and understand, if we look down that middle column of focuses, It's prospect, list, reduce, and then move into sales. So this becomes the most important thing that we need to do as real estate salespeople as we move in to the month, which we're already in at the moment. So I appreciate for some of you, you're going to look at this and say, well, hang on, we're already in Nocember. Doesn't matter. It's never too late to jump on top of this and get it right. Well, it could be too late in a couple of weeks, but if you follow the schedule that we've got in place, all you have to do is, in terms of prospecting as we move into Nocember, identify immediate listings and nurture new year listings. So we need to figure out of the listing opportunities that you've got, inclusive of those that are under contention. So if you've got listings where you are competing against other agencies, the first dissemination we want to make are these listings coming in to be listed now, and if not sold and settled prior to Christmas, at least unconditional? Which of those ones, and these ones need your focus right now, and which of those do we need to nurture so that when you come back from the Christmas break, you literally hit the ground running and are off to a fabulous start into the new year. So in presenting, we want action listing presentations for follow-up. And I don't just mean jumping on the phone, how's it going, where are we up to? I mean literal follow-up as we talk about on the List and Sell tour through SALEStrainer, and that is reinforcing the product marketing, reinforcing all of the things that you might have done or said at the listing presentation to give us a decided advantage in listing the properties for sale. We want to manage the price expectation of the pre-Christmas sales. That's very important in terms of proactivation. So if you can create that dissemination, if you can zero in terms of the motive and understand which listings need your attention right now so that you can set these up to become 2019 Nocember sales before you move into the new year. And then in terms of producing, targeting or focusing on those buyers that do give indication that they need to get something pretty much sorted before the new year, or at least before the Christmas break. So we want to avoid that productive downturn that December and January can bring by creating a concise plan that legitimately maintains a focus on those results. So I'm not asking you to give up your Christmas. I'm not asking you to give up your festive season. I'm just asking you to understand that when you come in on a daily basis, to prioritize and put your energy and your focus where it needs to be on the properties, specifically where it needs to be, and then in a premeditative fashion, focus on those ones so that after you come back from the break, you literally hit the ground running. You know, you're probably going to tuck in all that Christmas fare and everything else that goes with it. We want to avoid the breakdown that I can do. So what we did is we took November and we added it to December, and we introduced Nocember, which it's not to be the Christmas Grinch and it's not to be down on the Christmas festivities. In fact, it's precisely the opposite. It's to make sure that when we move into that festive mode, when we are actually taking the break, when we are actually celebrating, we can do it with the knowledge that we've actually achieved everything we ought to have achieved prior to. All right, so let's get in. So the first thing that we have for you, or we've compiled, so by virtue of the fact that you've actually registered to be on here, I'll ensure that this comes across to you. We'll be getting, hang on. All right. So we'll be getting the, just got to get rid of this. Okay, so just moving over into our action list, and I'll just get this up here now. Sorry, folks, I'm just a little bit rusty on this. So what we've prepared for you here is basically a task list, having enormous success with these on all levels of functionality, whether it be corporate leaders working on their real estate offices, whether it be sales team leaders working with sales teams. And if you're fortunate enough to be in an office where a sales team leader is working to one of these, they would have seen this beforehand. So I'll just reiterate that. If you are a sales team leader, get in touch with me and I can actually give you one where you can run this functionality with the entire team. It's still not too late, but if you want to be onto it next week. And basically what this does is outline in terms of its color-coded functionality. Those of you that have been to List and Sell would know that we've done this many, many times. It just sets an agenda for the tasks we want to follow moving forward. So we want to send, I'll be sending a recording of this. This is being recorded right now, and I would implore you to review this before you moved into it at some stage during the course of today. That's one there, ought not be there. I've got no idea. That's off another list. Sorry. So we'll just get rid of that. All right. Okay, download the action list, which is this that we've got to you. We'll make sure that that comes through to you, given that you actually have it registered. Lock in your holiday break. This is very important. And understand that in locking holiday, you are on a finish date, and then you are setting the start date. And as we work off, make sure that we're all the way to the tape on that finish date. And sure that when we do actually hit finish date, all of the preparation is in place so that when you come back on that start date, you do indeed hit the ground running. You want to lock that Christmas party date. Any leaders, I would have given them this advice. I always believe, you know, the closer you can have your Christmas party to the finish, the off, you know, it's not like it's the same. It's the moment you actually hit that Christmas party, the head can go on holiday. So if that Christmas party is in early, if it's in November sometime, well, you've got to be very guarded around this. Certainly if it's in the earlier parts of December, the same. We then want to prepare an exhaustive listings to get list. Now, I've got to say, I think this fundamentally, because being the salesperson I am, and that listing always comes before selling, this would be my major focus straight up front, in that I would be absolutely certain that this list was exhaustive and ready to go. And if you come down the bottom here, you'll soon see that we've created that into two separate lists. So these are the ones you're going to focus on, of listings to get before Christmas. The important thing being the actions that we set around those, which I'll get to on the list in just a second, and those that you are planning to list in early 2000. So this is really contrived around a simple conversation, which you'll see that's built into the list itself. So we prepare those exhaustive lists. So, and I mean anyone, so that so much as looks like they're farting in the general direction of listing a property, put them on the list. I want you to include those that are quite contentious, where you might be up against a competitor and you feel like the decision's already been made, and you might even feel that you're not going to win this listing at all. Irrespective of that, get it onto the list. So once we've built that list up, it might be that we then have to ask a couple of questions to determine whether they're on the before list or the after list, but you need to have this exhaustive list, and we're going to look at starting to create an advantage around that. The next thing that I ask you to do is to look at your own individual listings, and I'd ask that you grade these on motive. And I'll just say this slowly so that we all get our heads around how this works. So, well, actually, I'll just jump back into the, hang on, just quickly, just for the sake of the argument, into showing you how I believe you should evaluate these listings. Now, this is more, it's a little bit different to what I'm normally saying. I usually say that you grade your listings in 3 categories, A, B, or C. But as we move into the before or after Christmas question that we need to be asking our sellers, and believe you me, it's as simple as that, in a call that you should be making over the next couple of days to each of your sellers, whether it be after the open for inspection this weekend, or it be just in general follow-up during the week. The first question I'd be saying to them is, or I would have for them is, look, if your property, what are you going to do if this doesn't work out before Christmas? And that's the way to ask the question. What are you going to do if we don't get you moved before Christmas? So it's a reverse fashion question to see how they respond to that. If they come up and they say, well, Mark, it has to happen, you can almost assume that panic is set in. And then what we call an FAB listing, you need to find a buyer before Christmas. These are a paramount interest and require your full focus. They could then be an A-class listing, which I mean, these ones can be a little bit further. So if they still say, well, we'd like to get it done, I'm looking at these ones that absolutely must sell. They won't own this address in the new year. And then we've got those that they are committed to sell. So I should say committed there to sell, but still have a bailout plan. And the list goes on. Obviously, at this stage of the game, I'm interested as to which ones fall into this A and or B category. The Bs that become Cs, even the Bs that the BAs, these as we move down here are of lesser interest because they're going to fall into the I'm pretty cool if it doesn't happen until after Christmas. Because what you're going to find with those sellers that even in their own headspace, they may well move into, well, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And they're, of course, attending their own Christmas parties. They're thinking about their Christmas break and their head goes on holidays and it doesn't really require the same degree of attention that you might think it does. So I would then be very much okay with moving away from the focus on those sellers as we move in. So we've prepared that list. We're now looking at the listings and we're looking for the A's and or strong B's, the B pluses, as the listings that we'll be focusing on. So you then from that prepare a fab property list. So if you come down here to the bottom, the ones that are A's and or high-end B's, immediately go on to this list with was the price that it is right now, it will be, and then there's provision for the client to sign off on that. And I'll move to that in just a moment and explaining in what we're going to be doing. But these are basically your sold before Christmas list. And whether or not you believe this to be the case, it's purely by focusing on this list, by even writing it down, that it draws your attention to it, and the activity and the functionality that you carry out on or before Christmas will be squarely focused on, in the first instance, getting those properties sold, and then coming back to the primary instance, focusing on, of course, your listings to get now, and then your listings to get as we move into Christmas. All right, so then you begin calls on the qualified Christmas motive, and I just gave you the dialogue for that. I'll reiterate it so that we know. When you're talking to an owner, you start the conversation with, if we didn't have you sold before Christmas, how do you feel about that? And just see how they respond. If they then turn around and say, well, Mark, we want to get the job done, so look, I probably need to come and see you, and we need to take some action around an R2S, a reduce to sell, reduce of the asking price to get the property sold. Remembering that asking price is not much more than bait. So if that bait has not had people or buyers making offers on the property, then the price has to come down. The asking price has to come down to reinvigorate that. So we begin those calls on the Christmas motive, yeah? Then we set the listings and sales targets. So over the course of the weekend, you need to look at your listings and sales goals as opposed to targets for the month of Nocember. Now, given that we're actually combining December and November together, it's just logical that what we've got to do is set the goals against both of those months combined. Now, I believe that needs to be at least 1.5 times, if you look at it, the previous November, or the cumulative total of November and December bound into one. Understanding, of course, that when we're setting goals, they are mandatory. So by their very nature, they need to be conservative. So don't set a goal as an aspirational setting. Don't talk about what you'd like to hit. Set it as a mandatory target. So it needs to be conservative. And my rule of thumb has always been to set that against the previous year's performance. That's where I benchmark it. So for argument's sake, last November, I did 6 listings. And then in December, I did 3. I would say conservatively to set a Nocember target of 10 listings would be okay with me. Targets, on the other hand, can be aspirational. So with targets, I always say a target is something you take aim at, but don't necessarily hit. And if you get close to it, everybody applauds. So with your targets, they can be aspirational, and I will usually pit them against my best month ever. So I won't be worried about the time date. I won't be worried about whether it's July or September. I'll say if my best listing month ever is 12, I might set my Nocember target to 13. I hope that's relatively clear as we move on. Okay, so you need to set those and be very clear on them. Do not hit Monday morning without knowing what your listings goal and your sales goal is for the month of Nocember, having made that decision to move through that. I then download the 4 possible outcomes. So something we'll be sending to you, particularly as it. Oh, sorry, I just received a message. There you go, folks. Sorry, thanks for that. I just got a message. So here we've got the list that we're looking at again. You should all be seeing that. I might just ask who I got there. Is that okay? Give me a thumbs up, Robbie. Yeah, okay. All right, so we've got the list back up there. So we're evaluating, prepare that list, prepare the fab property list, which we talked about, begin calls on the listings to qualify the Christmas motive. And now we've set the listings as sales goals. So the next thing we're going to do is download the 4 possible outcomes to gestation letters. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is as we're looking at the listings to get list. And if I move up here, you can see that I contain this all in an agenda. So the first thing is your key dates, your Christmas party, holiday break, annual individual goal setting. We've been through that. We've then set the listings sales goals benchmarked at 1.5 times last November, December. The R2S is to be set against the sold before Christmas list. So if we're going to set up a price reduction, they need to fall onto that sold before Christmas list. And then you need to honestly evaluate that. Now, when I'm looking at that as a sale price, I follow the major rule of negotiation and I ask for more than I really want. And I've got to give that number. And the only thing I'm really concerned about is that they hear that number. So when I compile this list of fab listings, I'll take this up and I will ask the client, after I've discussed it with them, to just sign off on it. That's the most important feature. All right, so the additional aspirational targets can be measured against the best month ever, which we just discussed or just shared with you. Now we're moving into our listings to get. So to begin with today, you need to compile an exhaustive list of possible listings to get. And I'm just reiterating on what we said before, absolutely everything you can possibly imagine. We're then going to determine the current status of each property. Is it before or after Christmas? So in your discussions with these prospective listings, did you want the property? How would you feel if the property wasn't sold until after Christmas? Because they need to understand, if they get the property listed pretty much by about the middle of November, the chances of them getting a lock-in prior to Christmas are quite remote. And if they then fall into the after Christmas camp, that doesn't mean dissuade them. If they say, I still want to get it sold before Christmas, and they're talking to you on the 25th, you just list it, you know. List first, ask questions later. I'm just talking about from your perspective. And those that are going to fall into next year and even this year, we then want to establish reinforced product marketing mediums. It's very, very important that we put a lot of energy into making sure that we're given every conceivable chance. So if I come back up here, this is what here. We want to download the 4 possible outcomes. So I say that when you actually identify a gestation seller, someone who is definitely or imminently listing, there's only 4 possible outcomes can occur if you go down and do that listing presentation. Obviously, the magic one is they sign the agency agreement and they're listed with you. So there's a whole set of protocols that we can work around that. The one that I'm then more interested in is those that are selling imminently but are moving into what we refer to as the selection phase. So they've interviewed 3, 4, sometimes a couple of agents, and they're now evaluating those agents on what they're offering and what they might get in return. So one of the first things we do around the 4 possible outcomes, on top of the regular follow-up where you're ringing them every week, you know, when are you listing, when are you selling, that sort of stuff, when you're putting the property on the market. But we also want to make sure that everything we've done and said makes sense. So these gestation letters will be sent to you by virtue of the fact that you've registered on now. The first one is that we openly invite them to come and check out one of your, what we call welcome homes, or what you might be calling still an open for inspection, whereby we will highlight the differences or the advantages of the properties that are listed with you and how you actually conduct those open for inspections. The second letter that we'll send out is one where we do what we call a buyer match. I think that's very important. I used to have this as number 3, but I can tell you, and this is just something as a little bit of a sidebar, please do not forget this. I can tell you almost categorically now, if a property owner wants a market appraisal, they are likely not selling imminently. Any seller that asks for a price is probably not selling straight away. But if you use the word buyer, if you say we have more buyers than we have available property, which is our favorite prospecting line, if you are indicative of buyers that you have, you'll know this, or we know this through PMBX, which is our put the message in the box. If we mention we have buyers in the area, the sellers ring up and they'll say, who have you got? How much are they spending? When are they looking at buying? So if we do a buyer match, it's an oldie but a goodie, and you send this out to gestation sellers and show them how many buyers you already have on hand, as opposed to competitors that talk about creating marketing programs or advertising programs to create buyers, when the assumption on most property sellers' behalf is that you should already have those buyers on hand. The third that we do is for us, the people that are involved with our property marketers, we send them out an example of our 2-view websites, and we show them the power of individual property websites and how they can behave locally. And the 4th letter will be that around accolades. And indeed, if you are on board with something like an outside rating agency, whether it be the MPR system or Rate My Agent, as an example, that you then send them the links to Rate My Agent and show them how they sit. I hasten to add here, those of you that might be using it around this, if you are using something like Rate My Agent, and believe you me, I'm a big supporter of Rate My Agent, but if you're using it for prospecting, you're doing that at your own peril. I think it's dangerous to use a ratings agency that has all of your competitors in there to promote prospecting, because you're actually drawing attention to your competitors and you're inviting the pit bull fight that open agents seem to be such a huge fan of. Anyway, I digress. So then we move on. So then we prepare a property seller's memo. So I have a memo that would be ready for you right now that literally, in a general fashion, explains to property sellers that there is the before Christmas and then after Christmas vendors, and if they could identify for us which category they fall into, because we really need to put all of our attention and energy into those that need to sell before Christmas. It's just a nice way of you creating that dissemination around the list. So you prepare that, complete your calls. So at the same time, you still need to call each of these owners and ask that question, are you before or after Christmas? Then I would ask you to register, because not next week, but the Friday after, we have another one of these, which is about finding your why, which you do need to do before you get back from the Christmas break. You need to start when you come back from your break in January with a total understanding of what you're doing in terms of your goals, your personal aspirations for the year of 2020, which we're going to call 2020 Vision. Send that memo to property sellers on November 12, which is early next week. Then by now you should be able to have two separate lists: your before listings to get Christmas, before Christmas listings to get, and your 2020. So you see those two lists here: your early 2020 and your before Christmas listings to get. And then we're going to put all of our energy into those. So you will have completed your calls and done your R2Ss. So the sales that you are planning on before Christmas, they're set up. We're now focused on the listings to get before Christmas, and then nurturing those listings that are going to fall after the Christmas period. So then we start to send the 4 possible outcome gestation letters, which I just referred to all of those sellers, but especially those that are falling after Christmas, on top of your follow-up calls. We then need to move into sending, for those that you've actually spoken to, those sellers where you've talked to them about a price reduction and you've given them that number on the asking price. We have an information that has been varied to them before Christmas. Once again, confirming with them that if they don't heed your advice and bring it back, the likelihood of that property selling prior to Christmas has been rapidly diminished. So those letters will be available to you rather than be sent to you in the download. You then need to commence, especially, in fact, on the entire list, inclusive of the list, both of those lists of listings to get, and indeed any of your current sellers, put them on your SMS marketing of your results. So if we go here in, I'll just get this new share up. To come into listandsell.com.au and you log on, you simply come across here into the library, jump into aids. Those of you that are making a note, slide on down. Oops, a daisy. There you go, Robbie. I've still got your little one up there. Okay, so you just go into aids, jump on here, slide down, prospecting and pro-activation, SMS marketing your results, and just put all of those clients, whether they're gestation sellers imminently about to list, whether it be before Christmas or after Christmas, and indeed your current listed properties, put them on the list, and you look at this later, but just go in and send them texts of all the sales that are made within your company in real time. Just look at the category and then just send those texts out to those clients. If you look at it from their perspective, they've spoken to 3 agents. With some of them, you might be second or third choice, but you're also sending these results in real time. It's imperative that this happens in Nocember, because we are in danger of our sellers wrongly assuming that sales stop, particularly as you get close to the month of December. But if you're sending these texts out and they're seeing sales occur, then they're fully conversant with the fact that properties are literally still selling. It's important that you get that right and you make sure that they're getting those on a basis of at least every 72 hours. I wouldn't do it any more than that. It doesn't matter if it's only once every 4 days or something like that, but make sure that they're getting those. Now, if you don't have any sales, for argument's sake, that occur this week, use some that occurred last week. It doesn't matter. They just need to see evidence of you sending properties into unconditional and selling properties. Absolutely imperative. All right. Then we reach the checkpoint. So on November 15, which is literally early next week, 7 days away next Friday, you need to measure your targets, and do not forget this, that we are 1/3 at that stage, or close enough to 1/3 of the way through Nocember, and you need to have achieved half the result. So if you've set yourself a target, let me rephrase that, a goal of just picking a number, 10 listings for the month of Nocember, on the 15th of November, you need to be on 10 listings. If not, you then need to take very strong countermeasures to fix that. And I don't care if you've got to go all the way back into early foothold protocols to make sure that you hit those numbers. All right. What on earth is this? Sorry, this can't seem to get these headphones. All right. So that's the checkpoint. Log in the SALEStrainer on the same day, which is next for the week after that, which we will go through and set you on another task list of finding your why and what you need to do. That's predominantly from the 22nd till the break time, but you will go into that break with a clear understanding of what your goals are for 2020. You then need to prepare a market roundup or something similar on December 3rd, making sure that that's good to go on the Thursday. You then also need to set that market roundup on the Thursday, which is December 5th. And then by December 13, you should be reviewing and setting your 2020 goals. So we're pretty much good to go on those dates. Again, assuming that everyone is okay with that, I can then confidently say that you'll have a strong Nocember and set yourself up beautifully for 2020 and hit the ground running. If you have any questions, feel free to actually send those through on an email, mark@, with a K of course, SALEStrainer.com.au.